All right. So on this very bright day and all of that, let's discuss something that I know that people don't necessarily click on, and it is a topic of conversation that's always there. Sometimes I think that's good, and sometimes I think it's not, and it's something I've tried to be as neutral about as possible because I think hockey is good. Hockey's fantastic for everybody. I don't care about race, nationality. I don't care about gender. I think everybody playing hockey is just better because hockey's fun and fantastic. Women's hockey has kind of been in the news for right reasons, wrong reasons, depends on how you see it. It has existed in some form since going back as far as 1899. There are pictures of women playing hockey going back to 1899. So it's not like they just started playing and they've just started, paying attention to hockey. Women have had, at least some interest, whether it was casual or not, interest in hockey going back a long way. There were 13,320 who watched the finale of the rivalry series between USA and Canada. U.S. won 4 out of the 5 games. They were close, but the U.S. was the better team, which is not necessarily a surprise if you've followed these two teams against each other for a long time. And they've had some pretty fun little matchups along the way, and fans will go and watch. The rivalry series works, and so the conversations kind of become maybe that's the way to go. Which absolutely yes, that makes sense. But there is an issue that is underlying that is there. There's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this, and it feels like both are going on right now. So I want to discuss that a little bit because for people who get easily irritated, they're going to get easily irritated anyways. But there are times where I think, okay, we'll get to my thoughts. Let's go through the numbers first. What started this whole conversation becoming more and more prominent was when the CWHL closed its doors May 1st, 2019. So you had 6 teams in the CWHL, you had 5 teams in the NWHL, a league which has the Boston Pride, Buffalo Buttes, Connecticut Whale, Metropolitan Riveters, and the Minnesota Whitecaps. So you go from 11 professional teams to 5, which means over half these young ladies are without teams. And it's a league that started in 2015, 2016, and 2018, 2019. Last year, their average attendance for 46 games was 954 people. So here's where the issue is and lies, and still lies there as far as I can tell. Now, the NWHL yesterday had its All-Star game, and they said it's sold out, standing room only. So I looked up the building that they had it at, and according to the internet, which usually pretty accurate. The attendance capacity at that arena is 700. Now, maybe I was looking something out of date, but it looked like it was 700. And so this is sometimes a bit of the issue. So, record 13,320 watch finale of USA versus Canada. Great. This is probably as high as you can get attendance for a women's game. I can't see if there was a game between, let's say they put a team in Vancouver and a team in Toronto. I can't see a game in Toronto where attendance would be any higher than that. I can't see it being that high either. And that's just reality. And I think the women who play the game understand that that's just reality. But I think there are people trying to help the argument that are hurting it. Again, I'll come back to that. So May 2019, Professional Hockey Women's Players Association is founded. And it was founded directly out of the CWHL closing its doors because they understand these leagues don't work. The NWHL doesn't really make money. And if the league doesn't make money, neither do they. So the women are saying we need to come up with a scenario where the league and the players at least are able to break even. Because they don't have any kind of health insurance. So if something happens on the ice, they're out of pocket on it. And some are making as little as $2,000 a year. So when you factor that into how many games they're playing, if they have a family at home and they have to pay for their own travel. As far as I can tell, they pay for their own equipment, travel, everything they pay for out of pocket. When they had the women's game at the All-Star game, they said this might be the first time that they don't have to worry about providing their own equipment and sticks that the NHL provided them. And for the NHL, it's minor. So where we're at right now is that the NHL, I think, would love to help. And people mention the WNBA. I don't necessarily think that always gets done right either. Here's the major problem. No, women's hockey is not as exciting or as fast as the men's game. And people need to understand that that's not a bad thing. There are plenty of other sports women play that against men, they probably wouldn't win. But it doesn't mean that the women's game isn't entertaining. I've always preferred watching women's curling over men's curling. Although the men's curling is, fantastic, and I do think one-on-one, I think the men would probably beat the women. Tennis, much the same thing. But I think where we run into trouble is like last night when I was watching the NBC coverage, and and people are going to say, oh, he's gonna go after Pierre. It's not just Pierre though. It's this feeling you get when people talk about women's hockey and they say, hey, this is actually pretty good. Why are you saying that? Why don't you just say, I saw a women's game the other night, and end it there? As soon as we say, actually, this is pretty entertaining, actually, they can skate, it doesn't sound good. It makes it to me, it diminishes the product, and it makes it sound desperate. So I can understand from the other side where they're like, oh, we're getting this rammed down our throats. On some level, I can understand them feeling that way. At the same time, I agree with these players. They should be able to at least break even playing the game. And if they can't, then there's no point in playing. And that's what they're saying. That's why they've boycotted for almost a full year now. There is no point to them playing a game that they're paying money to play and potentially risking their health. And then people are like, I wish they had body checking. Yeah, they have no health insurance. Give them health insurance and they'll probably talk about body checking after. Like, it's just this weird thing where we want it to be something that it's not, but we don't want to pay them for it. Which is fine. But then, to me, it's sort of like, okay, how would I put this? If I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, and I don't watch Grey's Anatomy, then my opinion on Grey's Anatomy really doesn't matter too much. And if you're talking about characters on the show, I go, yeah, they should just kill that person off. What? You don't even watch the show. So if you don't watch women's hockey, you don't have any interest in it, then that makes your opinion less substantial. Again, it's a fine line, right? Because again, there are people who just don't like it. I don't like it. I'm not going to watch it. Okay, fine. Then don't. But then when I also see like, oh, I want it to fail. I want it to die. Why? We have 3 kids in this house. We take them to play hockey every Wednesday. There is one kid that really enjoys it, and it's our daughter. She loves it. The boys, if I said to them this week, if I said, I don't think you guys are going to be playing hockey anymore, they'd be like, all right, cool. I don't think they'd care. The passion that a girl can have for hockey at a young age, just the same as what a boy can have for hockey. She even wants to watch hockey more than the boys do. So the idea that, we're going to tell little girls that are playing hockey, and here's where it's being done right, is hometown hockey. Hometown hockey, I've talked about since we had it here, how it's kind of lame. And it is. There's some lameness to it. There's some fun stuff at it, sure. If it's in your town, I'd recommend, go check it out. But don't figure on being there for longer than probably about a half an hour before you're like, all right, so we've done all the fun stuff, and out we go. But at the same time, they always feature a boys' team and a girls' team. And I think that's great. And they present them as just hockey players. And it's not presented as, hey, this is a girl that can play hockey. It's just, and you're the captain of your team, you're the defenseman of your team. What position which player do you most look up to in the National Hockey League? Which, and then it's the same conversation. And that's how it should be. Is instead of approaching it like, hey, it's really good, it doesn't suck, just approach it as they're hockey players. And if the National Hockey League does eventually get into this, and they will, and again, it's a matter of it's a tax write-off for the NHL to do it, and it's great PR. It's fantastic PR for the NHL to do it and be like, hey, so there's this new league we're starting, this Women's National Hockey League, WNHL. Can't be NWHL, right? So Women's National Hockey League. And we're going to partner up all of these teams with the men's teams. We're going to start with 6. And apparently there's some sort of a plan at the NHL head office to do this, to make it work. It should work. And at the very least, women won't have to bring all of their own sticks and buy their own sticks and equipment. So think about it. You're out on the ice as a National Hockey League player. You wind up for a slap shot. You take the slapper. Your stick breaks in half. You go back to the bench. They grab you another stick. No big deal. You're out there, a women's game. You go out there, you break your stick. It might be $150, $200, $300. Depends on what kind of stick you got, right? Maybe you can't afford a really nice stick, so your stick's like a $20 jobby, and it affects the speed of your shot, affects your game. So, if the women, just for the fact that they don't have to care if their stick breaks, they don't have to care if they need new equipment, it doesn't mean that they're going to starve for the next month. That's important too. But we do get caught up in this, and again, it's tricky. It's why I'm kind of trying to navigate for the right words into this argument that doesn't really need to happen. It really doesn't. But I think because of the fact that they try to take this story and they try to force it into National Hockey League conversations, that's where people resent it. And I somewhat agree, because at this point, it's not in the National Hockey League. It's not part of the National Hockey League. We do need to be aware. That's why this video is being produced. This is why I'm doing this today. And, women's hockey videos don't normally perform very well, and they will always generate a lot of downvotes and comments from people who just want to be negative about anything related to it. But it needs to be its own thing if the NHL's helping them out to start with. And again, for PR, it's a fantastic move if they do it. But they're waiting until it's the right time. They're not going to step in when this still exists. They're not going to try to step in because they'd love to have a team in Boston. They would love to have a team in the New York/New Jersey area, and Minnesota would probably work as well. And then you've got Toronto, you've got Montreal. Those are automatics. And then, from there, would they put a team in Chicago? Would they put a team in Detroit? Where would they go from there? And then it's a matter of making sure it's sustainable, which is where the women are right. And they're right to have gone on strike. The problem is this. They boycotted for a year. And the question that I can ask is, okay, it's been a year. As of May, it'll have been a year. Now what? So I don't think that there's been a tremendous outcry. And the fact that the NWHL's All-Star game apparently sold out that small arena they were in, is there any impetus on the NWHL to change anything? Because they're making stars out of all of the players who decided not to go on strike. Or, if those 200 plus that boycotted this year, if those are the 200 plus of the best, and now they've got a bunch of other young ladies playing for them in the NWHL, apparently the fans may not care a whole lot. And that's where it gets tricky. We all know who Hillary Knight is. Hillary Knight's fantastic. I love Hillary Knight. But does she sell tickets? And that's one of those questions, right? Where it's like, okay, if she's playing for the Boston Pride, are there a lot of people who would buy Boston Pride tickets who wouldn't buy them if she wasn't there? And that's a question the NWHL may very well have had answered for itself already this year. And if their attendance is still right around here, there's nothing driving them to try to bring these women back into the fold. And they can probably pay the women who've come in to replace them a lot less money. And now by saying a lot less, when your minimum's $2,000 a year, I just mean your top end, there probably isn't one. And it's tricky. The one thing that stands out to me is you've got the CWHL, which existed for a while and went out of business. You got the NWHL, which was started in 2015. The National Hockey League took well over a decade to actually make any kind of headroads. And not only, or inroads, not only that, but in the beginning, there were plenty of times where it looked like the NHL would go out of business. And it was just hanging on by a thread. And whether it was war that caused it problems, or it was just teams not making money, buildings burning down, the NHL, the actual men's hockey league that we currently watch, that we spend all this money on, The NHL was not a financial success in its beginning. It didn't generate attendance that was huge. And not only that, but there were rival leagues that did pretty well themselves. There was the Pacific Coast League, did pretty darn well in the beginning. And one could argue was more successful than the National Hockey League at points. But eventually the NHL gets its footing. They figure themselves out. They generate history, which can be a big thing. And I don't think that the women's game has had a lot. They've got Olympic history. There's a history between the U.S. and Canada, which is why you can get 13,320 people to fork over money to go and watch USA and Canada against each other, which will always be a winner. But if you have the Buffalo Buttes against the Metropolitan Riveters, where's the history in that? And how many people are really invested heavily in that history? The tricky part for women's hockey, I think, if it's going to work, is that you have to not compare it to the men's game anymore. That has to stop. It has to. It has to stand on its own. And I will agree with the naysayers on that. It cannot just be tied. You can have agreements between NHL teams and teams in the women's league. You can have it where if I go to a Canucks game, let's say there's a women's team in Vancouver, and I go to a Canucks game, that they throw me a free ticket for a women's game 3 nights from then. They're like, hey, here's a free ticket to go check out the women's game. I'm like, all right, cool, I'll go. Free tickets. And that kind of a cross promotion could work, so that I sit there and I go, tickets to this game are about $20, and tickets to that Canucks game I watched the other night was, $100 or $80. And so this game, comparatively speaking, since it's a smaller price, I could bring the whole family. I could, and you can have family packages and things like that, where it becomes more of that almost like junior hockey vibe, where junior hockey, you can go to a Vancouver Giants game and take your family and not be broke. Whereas a Canucks game, that's more of a challenge. And that's why both work. For women's hockey to work, though, they have to stop comparing to the NHL. And they have to stop. And this is where it gets tricky. Because you're looking at a women's professional league where your attendance is 954, the interest isn't there. So you can't kind of push it like it is. And you can't kind of push it like it's this really big deal that it's not. So there has to be some balance to it. I'm not sure how to achieve that balance. I know on this channel I occasionally do a video about women's hockey. And I will say, as I've said before, I have always enjoyed watching women's hockey. Right back to the first women's hockey that I saw at the Olympics, way back when they wore pink jerseys for Team Canada, because, whoops. But, those were, I thought they were cool jerseys. I remember at the time thinking, I wouldn't mind wearing a pink Team Canada jersey. That'd actually be kind of different. But, I got why people didn't like it. And then there was Manon Rhéaume trying out for the Tampa Bay Lightning, which was a huge firestorm of interest. And Manon Rhéaume cards were really popular, even though there was never an actual NHL card of Manon Rhéaume, because she didn't actually play in a regular season game in the NHL. But she's still a very well-known name. She dropped the puck at the first NWHL game because she's marketable. And so they have to find a way to make themselves marketable and still at the same time say, we're not trying to be the National Hockey League. Because when, and then being at the All-Star game, again, I enjoyed the 3-on-3. I thought it was fine, considering those women had never played 3-on-3 before. It's a totally different feel when it's 3-on-3. There's a lot of empty ice out there, and I'm sure that would be something they'd need to get used to as the game goes along. But how do you achieve that balance, and what do they end up doing? Because if the NWHL comes out this summer and says, you know what, we're doing really well, these women backing out of our league and boycotting it, probably the best thing that's happened to us. We made more money this year. And yeah, we're good. We're going to keep operating. If they say they're going to operate again next year, the NHL is going to say, we're not stepping in until we're the only league. We don't want to have to deal with another women's league. We don't feel like stepping into this headache. And that's what they've said all along. I don't know what the other women do. Now, I agree with people who say that the rivalry series proves that you kind of have to make it an exhibition. Agreed. And I think the women would make a lot more money that way, too. than playing in front of 950 people. And so we're going to probably see something along those lines. But they can't keep trying to make it sound like, hey, it's actually pretty good, because it actually diminishes the product. You never hear that about other women's sports. You ever hear, hey, I watched the women's tennis yesterday. They're actually pretty good. They can actually play. They hit the ball, and then it goes over the net, and then the other girl hits the ball back. It's pretty good. Don't do that. Because, again, it makes it sound like you're trying too hard to push it. And that's where people will come out and say all the negative things. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, as I know people will. I don't expect people to sit through the entire 20 minutes and listen to me talk about this. But it's my birthday, so if I want to talk about it on my birthday, I can. And hey, I do wish the women that are fighting this fight all the luck in the world, because it's tricky. You want this to be the reality, not this, where there's no health insurance and they don't make any money. So when I hear people saying, well, just go out and play or not, I could not imagine strapping on a pair of skates and going out and playing when there's no health insurance, where I know if I take a shot and if I get a concussion, I'm completely screwed. So I cannot imagine going out there as a woman right now and playing and not being completely stressed out of my mind. But again, let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And I guess the big question is, where do they go from here? Thanks for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.